Welcome to APUSH for All. We are your hosts. I am Ms. Keltner.
And I'm Dr. Garrison.
And this is big for us, Dr. Garrison.
Yeah, this is really exciting. This is huge.
Yeah, I'm feeling a bit nervous, honestly.
I think we're going to put together a great final product, but we're going to be learning a lot as we go.
Yeah, and I think what we have working in our favor the most is that we both really have the face for a podcast.
Yeah, big time.
You know, maybe not the voice, but we both have the face for a podcast.
Yeah, and we've been told that.
Yeah, we have been told that by many people. But we're very excited. So welcome to our first APUSH for All episode. And for those of you who are wondering, APUSH is a class that we both teach together. It's called Advanced Placement U.S. History. It's a college-level U.S. history class designed for high school students. And we've both been teaching it for a number of years. And so we thought we'd create a resource for our students, but also we hear a lot from adults that they wish they knew more about history, or they wish that they would have cared about it more when they were in high school. And there just seems to be a searing regret in a lot of adults that we talk to about their lack of historical knowledge. So that's kind of why we put this podcast together. So whether you're currently navigating APUSH or you're someone who's just eager to explore our rich and complex history in this country, I would say that this podcast is for you. So we're going to talk about a lot of great stories. I think another thing we really want to focus on is history in the news and trying to connect, you know, what's happening in the modern day to what's happened in the past. So whether you're a student, a history enthusiast, a blossoming history enthusiast, or just somebody who's curious to learn about the past, this is APUSH for All, American history for everyone.
The American flag has not been planted on foreign soil to acquire more territory, but for humanity's sake. These were the words of President William McKinley in 1899, defending America's new overseas empire. McKinley framed imperialism as a moral duty rather than an act of self-interest, a stance that you could argue has shaped and justified U.S. foreign policy for decades. And while many Americans have forgotten the McKinley presidency, here in 2025, he's experiencing a bit of a comeback. After his re-election, President Donald Trump invoked McKinley's name and policies, drawing direct parallels between the turn-of-the-century expansionist era and America's global position today. And Trump even claimed that McKinley is, quote, underrated. So given all the recent excitement, the question is, how does McKinley's imperial vision echo in modern politics, and what lessons can we take from the past? Let's dive into America's age of empire, McKinley's role in shaping it, and why these debates still matter.
So, Dr. Garrison, I have to say, you sounded exactly like President William McKinley.
Yeah, well, thank you. I've done a lot of research into his voice.
You can hear it on Wikipedia. If you Wikipedia him, it's got a recording.
I'm kind of, in a way, like Daniel Day-Lewis when he was doing Lincoln. Very method.
Method alert.
I've been McKinley for the last week. I don't know if my students realize that, but last week has been nothing but McKinley.
Oh, yeah. They have been talking about it. It's actually all over the school.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Yeah. So to understand McKinley's approach to imperialism, I think we need to go back to the 19th century. The United States had just emerged from the turmoil of Reconstruction following the Civil War, and we have a lot of rapid industrial expansion, which is known by the Gilded Age. So by 1890, America had become an economic powerhouse, but many believe that the next step was to project power beyond its own borders.
Yeah, and many will recognize that this is a continuation of Frederick Jackson Turner's beloved frontier thesis. I know our students love Frederick Jackson Turner's ideas.
Right.
And this idea that manifest destiny is this very real component to American identity. But what happens when you run out of the frontier? Where do you go?
You go outside of the continental United States.
It's time for an empire, basically.
Yeah. And the U.S. is late to this imperialism party. So they are looking at what Europe has been doing for the last, 60 to 100 years. And they're also looking at how Europeans have justified their own imperialism. So one of the biggest justifications for all of this expansion was called social Darwinism. And that was the belief that stronger nations were destined to dominate weaker ones. And even American writers like Josiah Strong, in his book Our Country and Its Possible Future and Present Crisis, written in 1885, argued that Anglo-Saxons had a duty to, quote, civilize non-white nations. And then even militarists like Alfred Thayer Mahan, who wrote in his book The Influence of Sea Power Upon History in 1890, argued that in order to be a great nation, you had to have naval supremacy. And so that would require the acquisition of overseas coaling stations and naval bases to make that possible.
So people might be wondering, coaling stations, what do we need these coaling stations for? What's up with that?
Well, if you're going to, overseas places and you have sort of this chain of your empire that you're going to have to refuel at certain places, you're also going to need to defend some of these islands that you have taken over or places, on continents that you have taken over. And so the naval bases are, kind of twofold: A, to defend what you've acquired, and B, to also get to places that you have acquired.
It's almost like the United States is already anticipating a need to grab some of these islands in the Pacific for a future engagement.
Right.
I mean, we're almost seeing the beginnings of World War II, at least the American.
Whoa.
I'm just saying there's things here that are at work. Powerful forces.
Well, hindsight is 20/20, Dr. Garrison, as you know.
That's true. Good point. So all this maybe helps us actually transition to explain Hawaii, right? First off, the lesson here is never trust American sugar planters. I think we all know that. Think about the Dole family. You ever thought about the Dole family?
I have thought about the Dole family, I think, in ways that other people have never even considered.
Wow.
You pick up a bunch of bananas at the grocery store.
Right.
I see the Dole logo, and I know what that means.
Yeah.
So let's tell the people.
I think it's worth noting that the Dole family and those of their ilk on the Hawaiian Islands were basically Americans who had come over to Hawaii in hopes of establishing some of these plantations and some economic benefits. And then all of a sudden, there's this realization that there's a possibility of actually taking over the island entirely. They kind of lead a military coup, don't they?
Yeah, they really do. I mean, that is their main goal is to overthrow the Hawaiian monarchy and to basically control the entire chain of islands for their own benefit. And
they did so with the United States military sort of backing them up. So,
right. Yeah.
It kind of makes you, like you said, you look at bananas a little differently now.
Yeah.
And those Dole sugar fruit cups.
Oh, yeah, the fruit cups.
Yeah, those, and it turns out those are not good for you.
No, I try to stay away from those. Too much sugar.
A lot of sugar. So, okay, Hawaii is its own separate thing. Again, we can kind of see that there's this long view of the Pacific. But then comes the Spanish-American War of 1898. And I think you could argue this is a major turning point in U.S. history. So basically, real quick, after years of Spanish rule, Cuba had fought for its independence. It fights its revolution. And the United States is sort of like backing Cuba here. And there's a lot of sensationalized yellow journalism, William Randolph Hearst, Joseph Pulitzer. There's this competition to try to claim the narrative of what's happening in Cuba. And as a result of all this media attention, America kind of becomes pretty fervently pro-U.S. intervention. And there's even this moment where the USS Maine, docked in Havana Harbor, is blown up. It's torpedoed and it sinks, and everyone says, remember that the Maine, get this, to hell with Spain. I mean, oh my
cursed
gosh. I know.
On our first episode of the podcast. I try
not to,
but it's a quote. It's fine.
A quote.
It's a historical quote.
And this was so popular that President McKinley kind of reluctantly asked Congress, maybe we should declare war.
Yeah. And I mean, this begs the question, what were America's intentions really in getting into this war? Was it really to support the Cubans and as the phrase went, Cuba Libre, that many Americans started adopting? Or was it for the purpose of defending our national borders because Cuba is only 90 miles off the coast of Florida? Or was it because Cuba had a lot of sugar fields, plantations that were very attractive to American investors?
It kind of sounds, Riley, that you're pushing maybe a little bit of a conspiracy theory here.
I just want to make sure that we cover all of our bases, that we're really looking at this Spanish-American War from all aspects.
And there's a lot of talk about what really happened.
Right. I was just at Arlington National Cemetery in Washington, D.C., and I saw the mast of the Maine. They actually have it at Arlington.
What a powerful moment for you.
I thought about the Maine and, what do you think, Dr. Garrison? Did it really sink? Did the Spanish really fire on it?
I mean, it would be pretty insane for Spain to fire on the Maine. Do you see what I did there?
That was a lot of rhyming.
It makes no sense for Spain to attack America at a moment when they're incredibly weak and barely holding on, knowing that it would have brought unwanted American attention. So I don't know.
Well, we actually do know the answer. In the 1970s, there was an investigation done into this, and it was proven that Spain actually had nothing to do with the explosion of the Maine, that it was actually an internal combustion that happened. Now, whether that was intentional for the United States to set off this explosion or if it really was just a coincidence that there was an issue aboard the ship, either way, this is America's entry point into the Spanish-American War. And the war is very brief, but it is very decisive. It was actually called the Splendid Little War because it only lasted 4 months. And, of course, it's an American victory.
USA.
America.
USA.
And it leads to the Treaty of Paris, which, if you have to guess what treaty ended a war, you just guess the Treaty of Paris, and probably 9 times out of 10 you'll be correct. So this was signed in 1898, and the U.S., to the spoils of war go the victor. And I think I said that wrong.
You did.
But it was something along those lines.
You've recovered well. I was going to jump in and make fun of you, but you actually
I just did it myself.
Yeah.
So the U.S. is going to get control of Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. And Cuba is technically going to gain its independence through this war, but it's going to be placed under U.S. kind of observance via something called the Platt Amendment, which was added to the Cuban Constitution in 1901. And this is going to allow America to intervene militarily whenever it was deemed necessary.
Yeah, and so it seems like a huge win from the expansionist perspective. But in fact, not everyone was on board with this vision of empire. Not everyone backed McKinley's sort of expansionist ideas. In fact, there was an Anti-Imperialist League, and it was founded in 1898. And its whole goal was to oppose the annexation of the Philippines, arguing that what America was doing there went directly against its founding principles. And even Mark Twain, the great Missourian, called imperialism a betrayal of democracy. And even the likes of Andrew Carnegie feared that these overseas expansions would drain American resources and lead to future conflicts. This idea that America would become entangled in the world's affairs was a real concern.
Yeah, and even though you said Andrew Carnegie's name incorrectly, we're going to let it slide.
I think there's
Dr.
lots
Garrison.
of ways to say words.
Well, there's a right way and there's a wrong way.
Interesting.
But anyway, McKinley is going to justify this annexation of these places in explicitly moral terms. And in a speech defending U.S. control of the Philippines, he's going to claim, quote, "I walked the floor of the White House night after night until midnight, and I am not ashamed to tell you that I went down on my knees and prayed Almightily God for light and guidance. On one night it came to me that there was nothing left for us to do but to take them all and to educate the Filipinos and uplift and civilize and Christianize them." End quote.
Wow, that was powerful. I have chills. That's a pretty explicit message there, right? I mean, this is a God-given task. It's almost in line with this idea of manifest destiny. It's like an extension of manifest destiny.
Right. And you have to always be thinking about what can a source tell us, but also what are its limitations. And I think that a limitation of the quote I just read is that this is from McKinley's point of view, and he knows he's a president. He knows that his words will be remembered and what he writes down will be examined. And so he is trying to, paint what the United States is doing, I think, in a way that is going to seem very favorable.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the quote reveals that this is a benevolent mission from the perspective of McKinley and the expansionist task. And it really doesn't say much about some of the other motives that were probably equally as strong, like economic and strategic visions for the future. But in fact, the Filipinos were not super happy about this.
No.
They fight for their independence, at least the Philippine-American War. It is a pretty nasty affair. I mean, the Filipino nationalists resisted U.S. rule, even fought a guerrilla-style war. Over 200,000, probably many more than that, Filipino deaths from disease, famine, war. There were quasi-concentration camps that the United States constructed. I mean, this is pretty ugly stuff.
Yeah, and just to give some years here, because I always say, and maybe this will be a new tradition we start on our podcast, I say chronology and you say matters. Chronology
matters.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay.
So Spanish-American War ends in 1898. This Philippine-American War lasts from 1899 through 1902.
Yeah, and then so it's really the United States is immediately involved in these affairs and will stay involved in the Philippines for quite some time.
Quite some time. And so by the 20th century, the U.S. has firmly established itself as an imperial power, controlling territories both in the Caribbean and in the Pacific. And McKinley's presidency is really going to set the stage for Theodore Roosevelt, for good old Teddy, good old TR, and his vision and his idea of big stick diplomacy. Also, William Howard Taft's idea of dollar diplomacy and Woodrow Wilson's moral diplomacy, which shaped American foreign policy for decades, and you could argue even today.
So when we're thinking about these modern day connections, let's now fast forward to 2025. And President Trump makes these direct comparisons between his potential foreign policy and McKinley's imperial vision. And he's recently announced plans to rename Denali back to Mount McKinley. Interesting.
News alert. And it's already happened.
This is topical.
Officially, this happened yesterday.
Google said that they're going to go ahead and make these changes on Google Maps.
Yeah, so we are talking to you on Tuesday, January 28th.
Right, timestamp.
And I believe that this became official yesterday, Monday, January 27th.
And almost immediately, it's reignited some debates over historical memory and national identity. Like, how do we remember these events? How do these events fit into our own sense of self? Pretty important stuff. Yeah,
not only that, but reports suggest that Trump has considered a return to this idea of territorial expansion, floating ideas like reasserting U.S. control over the Panama Canal, expanding military bases in the Pacific, and in a recent speech, he argued that, quote, McKinley understood that America must project power to protect its interests, and we are going to do the same, end quote.
Yes, this raises some big questions. Are we seeing a modern revival of imperialism? Is this just political rhetoric? I mean, there's been talks of Greenland and the Gulf of now America. So these are some interesting times. Greenland. When I think of Greenland, I think of Mighty Ducks too. I'm sure you do as well.
Well, that's not the first thing that comes to mind for me. I think of the West Wing and where they do the map scene.
No. So when you think of Greenland, there's a scene where Gordon Bombay, beloved coach of the Mighty Ducks, is leading Team USA, and the Iceland coach tells him Greenland is actually full of ice and Iceland is very nice. And so that's how I always thought of Greenland. But apparently there's some real interest in acquiring this frozen island of ice.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens with Greenland. But I think the echoes are very clear then and now that leaders, whether they're American or European, or even, we could see leaders doing this with Imperial Japan, are justifying expansion in moral terms. That, McKinley spoke of civilizing, quote, non-white nations, while today, leaders talk about spreading democracy or protecting American interests. And I think that the debates over economic interests versus moral obligations and the ideas of interventionism or staying isolated and really focusing on domestic policies and who benefits from American power, they remain just as relevant today as they did during McKinley's presidency.
And as we begin to wrap up, we would like to thank real quick. I think it's important to thank our sponsors because we do have a lot of support.
Oh, I mean, our lawyers have been going through these sponsorship,
it's huge,
requests, whatever you may call them. Our inbox has been flooded with them. So, yeah, we definitely want to thank our sponsors. First up, Junior Java. This is a Ladue student-led coffee and tea company with a mission to make education more equitable worldwide. Every purchase helps kids, support kids in need, and fuel your studies and support a great cause. Check out juniorjavacoffee.com to shop and learn more.
And thanks, Junior Java, for keeping us and history brewing.
Ooh.
How was that?
That was good.
Is that pretty good?
Yeah, I really liked that.
Practice it in front of the mirror a couple times.
But that's not our whole list of sponsors.
There's more.
We also want to give big thanks to Cats of Family Dentistry, Scrawny Arms Farm, and the Healthcare Group for Women. These are all local businesses. We are coming at you live from St. Louis, Missouri, and we are honored by all of our sponsorship support.
Indeed. Okay, so let's wrap this up. We said we were going to do like 12 to 15 minutes. We're a little past that, but
we knew we would be.
I think that just shows our enthusiasm and passion.
Oh, yes.
All right, so what should we take away? Real quick, William McKinley's presidency is this pivotal shift in U.S. foreign policy, ushering in this era of imperialism and expansion that will really set the table for American foreign policy in the years to come in the 20th century. The Spanish-American War, annexation of the Philippines, shows American military muscle, but also these subliminal economic interests that are oftentimes papered over by moral justifications. This was not an unopposed movement, and there's a lot of Americans like those in the Anti-Imperialist League who are making these arguments about balancing power with principle, and we're still debating these very topics today. And then finally, we can see that in Trump's recent invocations of McKinley, that history isn't just a thing of the past. It shapes the very debates of today.
Yeah, so whether you're studying for the APUSH exam, this topic directly connects to themes of American imperialism, continuity and change in foreign policy, and debates over U.S. intervention. You can definitely expect to see these ideas presented in DBQs, LEQs, SAQs, and especially in questions about the Spanish-American War and its consequences.
All right, so thanks for tuning in. This has been APUSH for All. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe, and maybe I think you can leave reviews.
Yeah, we don't really know how this works yet, but we just keep yelling at people.
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
We also have an Instagram account.
Yeah, we sure do. And we are up to 35 followers.
Yeah, I mean, unbelievable.
I mean, we can separate our lives into two eras, I think. The time before we started this podcast and the time after we started this podcast. And I think today is probably one of the last days that we can actually go out in public without a disguise on, because the celebrity is just going to be massive.
Yeah, I'm ready for it, though. I'm ready to embrace it.
Yeah, I think we've been ready for this our whole lives. And, it comes around. And here we are.
Okay.
So, yeah, follow us at APUSH for All on Instagram. Message us if you want us to cover something specific or if you have a question about anything. And we have to give a shout out also to our logo creator. You can see our logo on our Instagram account, and we want to give a big shout out to one of our students, Maya Matthew.
And also our theme music. I think we're officially selected our theme music.
Yes, we have our theme music. So the one that started out the episode.
Yes.
Big shout out to
Nora. Nora did great. Nora Murphy did great. So this is really coming together. Our students really clearly want to be a part of this.
Yeah. So shout out to Nora. Shout out to Maya. And shout out. We also had some other people who submitted ideas for the logos, which we very much appreciated. Yeah. And
there's more to come.
Yeah, we couldn't do it without our sponsors, without our students, without our fans, right? So thank you very much, everybody. So until next time, keep learning from yesterday to make sense of today.